Here we go again.
We are live. Sorry. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Thriving with Rachael and Dr. Lou. As we do the first Wednesday of each month, we produce a live episode, so it gives you an opportunity to call in, ask any questions that you have with regards to anything that we've talked about to date, or any other questions, concerns that you may have with regards to how to thrive, struggles with regards to thriving, or just living a healthy wellness kind of life and enjoying life. So please ask any questions that you may have. I know we've gotten a few in the last week. If anybody's on and wants to start out with a question, you can. I know that one just came in a little bit ago that I was going to read, and maybe we can use that as a starting point. So the question is, how would you suggest balancing life with school? I have a pressing major which needs a lot of attention, but sometimes I find myself forcing myself to study or do work 24/7, which then overwhelms me. But then I feel guilty not doing the work or the studying. How do you find the fine line? How do you make yourself walk away and take time to also do life? Great question.
Not a good question. Man, I feel like it was just like yesterday that I was in school doing the same thing. That's tough to balance for sure. I guess it goes back to priorities and values, maybe. So something that we've talked about in the past, this idea of what are my values and do they sometimes conflict with one another? So I guess with that question, it sounds like education is a priority, but also self-care and having a life outside of doing work 24/7. So I guess would you say more time management with that, or do you think, like, what's your first thought?
Yeah, I guess time management obviously is a real key here, but keeping in mind that with work or with school, certain weeks may require more time than you'd like to give, and so we may be stressed, we might be overwhelmed. So keep in mind that thriving doesn't mean the absence of stress.
Right.
Doesn't mean the absence of struggling with things. We can still be frustrated, struggle, feel overwhelmed, and still thrive during that time. Now, the question has to do with how do you find that fine line? And as you were pointing out, definitely want to have that time management. So I'm a big fan of schedules with regards to setting time aside for time to play, but also time to work. And sometimes for me, when I get overwhelmed, I tend to want to do shorter stints. So I may need a lot more breaks, a lot more short breaks to get through something that I feel that I have a lot of stuff to do or feel overwhelmed by. That may not work for everybody. Sometimes people want to plow through, for like 6 straight hours and then, do nothing for 6 hours. And so you have to play that and see what works best for you.
Yeah, and I guess there's also a lot, you have to look at what your experience is when you're overwhelmed. So I know at least when I'm really overwhelmed and stressed, I end up kind of in that all or nothing mindset where I only have time to do this because there's so much, and I don't have time for self-care is something that I struggle with sometimes. And so then I don't really I'm not motivated to put myself in a position to try to take care of myself, and that's typically the first thing that goes for me if I have things on my plate. So I guess really paying attention to the verbiage, like we were talking about the other week too. Is it that I don't actually have the time to do it, or is it that it has to be a priority? I have to make it. I have to make a time for it, because I think self-care doesn't have to be, going to a spa or going to get a massage, even though that sounds wonderful. I think self-care could simply be, stretching before you get out of bed in the morning, or making sure that you grab a snack before you go to work or whatever it might be. So I think self-care can be redefined. I don't think it has to be something, or even downtime, it could be a 20-minute show as opposed to checking out. I don't know. So I guess that's the thing that comes to mind for me with regard to verbiage. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Yeah. And I know we have a couple people calling in. I'm not sure if you guys have questions or if you're just wanting to interact, but we'll kind of throw it back to you guys before we get to the other questions that came in through email. So.
Great question.
You want to repeat that question because it's hard to hear?
So if I understand the question, how do you navigate living in a country where you don't feel welcome? Was that it? Yes. So, and I guess I'd like to just generalize that in any situation where we don't feel welcome, whether that's a classroom, whether that's a work environment, whether that's a home, or a country, that feeling of being alienated, feeling unwanted, feeling different is very challenging, right? That's very hard to manage. And so we definitely want to, as we were talking about in the other question, have some balance as much as we can with areas of our life or situations in our life where we do feel welcome, we do feel accepted, we do feel loved and supported. That's easier for some people, more of a challenge for others, and so that's always something that's an individualized process. But I think a key goal, if you will, is to look for and find situations where you can get with others who you do feel that acceptance and that love, and spend more time with them as much as possible, stay connected with them as much as possible, whether that's in person, through chats, through texting, through phone calls, through emails, through Zoom, through however you can do that. The other question has to do with when we're feeling that uncertainty in life, and we're feeling worried about how things are going to go, like right now. You mentioned the election. We don't really have an answer yet, right? We're still kind of wondering what's the result.
A lot of unknown, yeah.
One of the things that I tend to try to do, and it's not always easy, is to remind myself what's within my control. What am I dealing with right now, and how do I want to show up? How do I want to be in this situation right now, regardless of what else is going on in my life? And that's not always easy to do. You know, we all have our emotions, we all have our responses to things, and we may get caught up in that emotion, and so we may present ourselves or be a certain way that isn't the way we want to be. And so we need to give ourselves some grace, some time to kind of take a step back and use some pause techniques and remind ourselves of our values and what we want and how we want to be, and try to then live that from time to time or as much as we can.
Can I also just ask you to expand on like what your experience has been? And so when that question came up, what is it that you're experiencing that gives you that conclusion, I guess?
The feeling of not feeling welcome.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like some of that might just be that I see that not everybody has the same opinion, and like in that feels awkward when you like have a sense that of course I'm right, of course I'm thinking this thing and that thing must be right, and other people don't think the same thing.
Right.
And that feels uncomfortable. I'm not sure if that's what I mean by like not welcome in this context.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that in situations where talking about politics, for example, or talking about religion, or sometimes even values and what we believe to be the right thing to do, when you are the minority in the sense of there's only one or two of you and there's 10 others who have a different viewpoint, you know, we're almost made to feel like we can't speak up, or we don't want to speak up. We're afraid to speak up. We're afraid to share our view, because we don't know how that's going to come across, what that is going
It's
to
be received.
yeah, and how it's going to be played out. You know, is that going to lead to arguments, yelling, or worse? So there's a lot of uncertainty. So we have to be careful of, you know, who are we with, when are we talking, you know, what are we saying. So we need to be mindful of that. But I think a lot of us share that experience from time to time of feeling alienated or unaccepted or different. And
What's your experience been with that? Because I know this has been a big topic this week, and
Yeah,
you know, a lot of
huge.
stress has been leading up to it. And I think there's a lot of stress still after the fact because it's still ongoing, which I think
Absolutely.
plays into it. So, what's your experience been?
Well, I just actually had the experience this afternoon. I was taking a referral for the program, and it was a friend of mine who was referring in and was talking about, you know, her week and how hard it's been and the uncertainty of things. And and I wasn't exactly sure which road she was going down.
Yeah.
You know, so I was, waiting. I didn't want to say like where I was before she told me where she was, because then we wait like, so it's been uncomfortable, right? And that uncomfortableness, I think, often plays a big role in how we then show ourselves or present.
Right.
And I think that's something that, again, we need to be mindful of. We need to be true to our own values and our own beliefs. But it's important to be able to have discussions. It's important to be able to share ideas, even though they may be different than yours. And sometimes that's an okay situation to be in with other people, and sometimes the crowd dictates that it's not okay. And I think we need to use our own discretion to determine when that is and when that's not okay.
I think it's hard because you can't really be your authentic self. You have to kind of be guessing
Yeah.
before you say it, so then you kind of cater to whatever it is. And I know another question we got in was, where did it go? Oh, the idea of how can you be who you are and who you want to be regardless of the situation.
Yeah, so the way I interpret that question is, people want to be a certain way, but depending on the situation, they may respond according to that situation. So if people come and they're all like gung-ho about, this particular person or party or whatever, you might want to be excited with them, but because there's certain things that you don't agree with, you are hesitant. How do you want to be, though, in that situation? Regardless of whether somebody's on the same side of you or not, do you want to be excited about your side? Do you want to share your ideas? And I think, again, we have to use our discretion and be careful we don't, set ourselves up to be in those conflictual situations that can get out of hand. But at the same time, how do you want to be and be true to yourself and share? If somebody asks me, I'm going to give you my opinion, but I may not offer the opinion if you're not asking me the opinion.
So kind of like the boundaries discussion that we had several weeks, or maybe it was even the last live session where we were talking about boundaries, right? And how do I express my boundaries without maybe stepping on other people's toes, or how do I get those boundaries respected when I'm not sure of how the other person's going to respond? And I think you brought up that day, I think, asking permission to give feedback, not necessarily asking permission to set a boundary, but asking permission to give feedback, because then it would hopefully be more well received, I guess, if you were asking. So I guess that also depends too, when you ask the question of, when I don't feel accepted, we have to kind of look at, is that my perception? Is that what's actually being said to me? Because I think there's a lot of stuff going on right now that has my perceptions. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's just my beliefs and my perceptions are kind of all jumbled sometimes, where I'm kind of questioning, like, ooh, like that person had a good point, but this person had another good point. And so it gets me kind of jumbled a little bit. So I don't know, I guess it also depends on if it's a safe person, and that it's a respected relationship.
True.
Probably plays a role also.
Yeah, well, that kind of ties into the idea of assessing your situation and knowing, what may play out and how that may play out.
Right.
Good questions, though. Anything else on top of that, or any other follow-up questions to that? Okay, thank you.
I'm like blind, so I can't read the questions.
So there was another question that said, when evidence doesn't support our preferred belief, how are we supposed to handle that? I think we were talking about that last week too.
Right, so that's kind of where we left off. So when evidence doesn't support the beliefs that I have, so which kind of goes along, because there was another question too, when my automatic thoughts don't support that. So I guess they kind of go hand in hand. So when evidence around me, so that could be other people, could be experiences that we've had, or my automatic thoughts, the ones that are just kind of coming in and create an awareness that's maybe not so helpful. What do you do? So I guess I'm trying to think of an example. Should have prepared this one. As far as beliefs, maybe let's say it's a belief in myself, my ability to be independent, my ability to be independent. Let's go with that one. My ability to be autonomous. So what happens when I have evidence that might support otherwise? So maybe I need to ask someone for help, or maybe I am not able to complete a task that I had planned, or Yeah, I think those are probably good examples even from this week, to be honest. So if I look at that and I perceive that as it doesn't support my belief that I'm autonomous or independent, I think there's a choice behind that as far as how I perceive. So when the other question with the automatic thoughts, how do you perceive the automatic thoughts? When your automatic thoughts are telling you this means you're not independent, this means you failed at being autonomous, what do you do with that?
Key thing there. You failed at being autonomous, right? That's like saying somebody just got back their math test and they failed, so they then say, I failed at being a student. Not really accurate. I failed at that math test, or I failed at doing that task, or I failed at completing that task is that alone in some ways, right? Now, you can generalize that and abstract that into the perception that I'm failing at being independent or failing as a student. What do we want to do with that information? You know, when we are looking for evidence to support our beliefs, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We are trying to support our belief that we want to maintain. So we tend to pick and choose. But we've lived a long time thinking negatively and putting ourselves down, so we're kind of conditioned to see that negative piece and then use that to support that old belief.
Like, yep, see, I told you I couldn't do it. I told you I wasn't independent, or I told you I wasn't autonomous, which then I think fuels further behavior not supporting that.
Yeah.
Right?
Which goes back to say that this is really hard to do. It's hard to change beliefs. It's hard to reinforce new beliefs. And that's why I think a lot of us get overwhelmed, a lot of us get frustrated, and a lot of us are able to fall back into old patterns quite easily. It's normal. It's natural. It's something that we all experience and we all struggle with. I think we need to go back to awareness and to tune in. How do I want to be? Which goes back to that other question. And how do I want to support my beliefs of being independent?
And is that the belief I want to reinforce?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's ultimately what it goes back to, because every piece of evidence and every automatic thought can take on a meaning, but we apply that meaning. And I think a lot of times it so automatically happens that we forget that we have choice behind the intentional thought and what we do with the thoughts or what we do with the evidence. So we could use anything to support or disconfirm a belief. It goes back to which one's helping me.
Yeah.
You know, these could be evidence for or against the belief that I prefer, but which one's helping? You know, am I choosing to take on something or continue to reinforce something maybe that's not helpful in reinforcing this idea that I'm independent or I'm capable? You know, I think that oftentimes we question ourselves, especially beliefs about ourselves, and that's the thing that really keeps us stuck and feeling unstable a lot of times, is that questioning, right? That lack of trust in myself, and the lack of trust in the belief that I could have X, Y, and Z things.
Yeah, that confidence is a key piece. And I think we've learned over the years to actually believe in that negative voice a little too much. And that's why it's so hard to create these new belief systems that actually support thriving in life, because they have not been reinforced enough. They have not been supported enough. And truth be told, there's evidence to support that you're a failure. There's evidence to support that you're not independent. I think what's important is to look at life the way you want to support the life that you want to have. And I think we can easily choose to look at things that we're doing as bad, and we will find that. Just ask a spouse or a partner or a good friend. I'm sure they'll be there for you to tell you exactly what you haven't been doing right. Yet there's also times, and I have to believe that there are evidence to support the positive as well. So if you fail at a math test, or if you don't complete a task, yes, that indicates or goes into the bank of saying you're failing as a student or you're failing as being independent. But how much evidence is there to support that you're succeeding at being independent? And how much is it that we're willing to look at? For example, if you get up and you take care of making your own lunch, breakfast, dinner, taking care of your daughter, doing things in the house. All of those demonstrate being independent. Our frequent automatic thought, though, is
That doesn't count.
that doesn't
I
count.
should have already done that.
It's a yes, but,
Right.
right? We constantly are doing that to ourselves. So we actually have evidence to support certain things, but we often look at it as not being good enough, not being sufficient enough. And I think that's where we get tripped up. If the goal is to support the belief, we need to take in enough evidence to actually support the belief and create that so that it becomes automatic, so that it becomes core belief to ourselves and to our being. And that's when we start to feel confident and feel okay about ourselves.
Yeah, I think sometimes though, I get questions that were related to, well, what if I don't have any evidence that supports the belief? And my answer for that is, well, then do you still want to believe that though? So even if you only have, or perceivably only have evidence that supports the belief that you prefer not to have, do you still want this other one? Because if the answer is yes, then that just means that the story is not over yet, right? We still have to be willing to create that evidence at that point. Because I think if we're constantly just out looking to see if it's gonna just pop up, I don't know if that's how that works. I don't know. I think it has to be intentional at that point. I don't think beliefs are automatically reinforced, especially if it's not one that I currently maintain.
Definitely not. It has to be intentional.
Right.
And sometimes we struggle to find that support and that evidence, so we might want to use our supports. And keep in mind, our supports are people, not necessarily those who are in the roles of supports, but the people who actually support us the way we need them to support us to achieve the goals that we want. So moms, dads, spouses, boyfriends, siblings, girlfriends, they all can be great supports. However, they may not always be good at supporting us at certain things. So we need to be sure of who we're going to and who we're utilizing to support us in the things that we need.
Do you have anything else on that? I couldn't remember.
No, I don't know if there was another
I think those
question.
were all the ones that we got in for this one.
Yeah. At least any of that I can't see anymore.
What'd you say?
I have one more.
Okay.
So obviously we're in the middle of this pandemic, and we're at the highest, case number today. Well, and we're going to be facing this for a long, long time. And so how do we, cultivate the fortitude to, we're all like, okay, I'm over this, I'm done with this, I don't want this to be anymore. And, but we have to stick with taking this for a long, long time. And it's so easy to just be like, oh, I just can't anymore. But we have to. How do you, keep up that, motivation and fortitude to do what you need to do?
Good question. So just to repeat the question, is since COVID is still not over somehow, which we all thought and hoped since the early spring that it would be, how do we maintain motivation to continue to do the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves anyway?
Yeah, I think reminders are things that are important to us, and understanding the value of why we want to do the things that we want to do. If it's important to you to be safe, if it's important to you to maintain a healthy lifestyle or a sense of wellness, if it's important to you to maintain social connection with people, it's not about can we, it's about how can we achieve those things. And I think reminding ourselves on a regular basis of what's important to us and how we then can go do that is one of those ways to do it. It's also important to notice that when we do that, how do we feel? What's the result? What's the impact on our life? In looking at the pros and cons, when I don't connect with people, when I stay isolated, when I don't reach out, when I stay in that overwhelmed state, is that who I want to be? Is that how I want to be? Is that helping me thrive? If that's not the answer you want, then what can I do about it? And oftentimes that's what we're focused on, is not necessarily about what creates it, but what can we
Now
do
what?
about it? It's now what?
Yeah.
So that's a piece to that answer.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, at least for me, COVID has like rocked my world as far as questioning what I value in life. It's gotten me questioning like, oh, do you really like want to get up at that time still? I mean, I know structure is, a thing for you, but do you really need that structure because now you don't have to leave your house? Or, do you really like going to the gym because, it's probably not safe to go to the gym, and so I kind of start questioning these things, and I start questioning what it is that I value. And I think when I found that I was really getting disappointed and overwhelmed, it's oftentimes because my values are not being reinforced. So really going back to that and evaluating, are these still things that I value? Because our goal is not to not value them anymore because I don't perceive that I can achieve them or reinforce them. But to your point is, how do I still achieve them? In the decade of decade, oh my gosh, I hope not. In the year of COVID, I think we have to kind of go back to the drawing board and maybe change the visual around the value itself. So you've talked in past podcasts that, health and fitness is really important to you. And you had to redefine, what does it look like to stay fit and healthy when I don't have a gym because you're used to going to a gym. So really, I guess, digging deep into investing my energy in how do I do it as opposed to whether or not I can. Because the longer we spend time in that debate of whether or not I can do it, I'm not actually doing anything. I'm actually just staying pretty stuck. So really going back to the drawing board, I think, is important because I feel like we're a lot more capable of doing things and being creative than we ever really imagined. I mean, just looking at this year about all the things that have changed in really amazing ways because we had to. I think if we put more of our energy into that, I think a lot of good things could come out of it. So that's a really good question. Like, how do you keep motivation?
Yeah.
I want to add one more thing to what you were saying, though, is also validating. Because as you said earlier, this is really hard. There's no rule book for this. There isn't any how-to for it. Nobody expected it. There's nothing to reference, know? So really validating that this is a really difficult task to manage and one that I'm not used to, and it might be bumpy along the way, and I might have days where I just need to check out and not do it,
Yeah, and that's okay. And we need to let ourselves know that that's okay. Mm-hmm. Like, we're not a failure.
Right.
If we're not doing everything we're supposed to be doing.
Or if I'm not motivated today.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we need to wait for motivation necessarily, but if we can validate the fact that it's hard, especially when we're not motivated, I think that's a really good place to start. As opposed to if I wake up and I'm tired, I'm too tired to do this. It's no, how do I still do some version of this when I'm tired? I think is maybe the shift in perspective that we need to try to encourage. It's really hard.
It is.
Really hard to do that. So that's a great question.
That's such a great question. It might be helpful for us to kind of continue it in our next podcast, to talk a little bit more about that and expand on that, because I think that's, we touched on a lot of things tonight where I think a lot of people can relate to, but I think that motivation, that ability to keep motivated when we feel like, when is this going to end? I think is a key piece, and maybe we should continue it again. Next time.
Yeah, it was a really, really good question. So hopefully we can stay tuned next time because I think I would like to explore that a little bit more, if you don't mind.
Well, thanks everybody for all the questions. Thanks for watching again. As we mentioned, it's going to be every first week of the month that we will do
every
this
first
live.
Week of the month. First Wednesday of
First
the month.
Wednesday of the month.
At 7 p.m. We've gotten requests for maybe potentially different times, so just let us know if a different time is better than 7. That was just the original request that we had. So let us know if there is a different time that is preferable. And also moving forward, we are going to still do the posts through Facebook, and we're still going to do it through GoToMeeting if you want to interact. But a lot of people actually don't have Facebook, I'm coming to find. So they asked if we could do it through YouTube, so we're going to do YouTube Live. Unless I can figure out how to do both. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
We'll see.
So we'll hopefully see you guys for the pre-recorded session next Wednesday at 7 p.m. for now, unless we hear otherwise. All right.
Take
Have
care,
a good
everybody.
night, everybody. Thanks for joining.